jobs, no pop-ups, cut the Department of No New Energy, cut out the Department of Education, merge, put them all across the board. We don't need it, the footprint is too big, send all those bureaucrats, unelected, who are making rules to control our everyday lives, back to doing something productive.
Very good. Mr. Castanuela.
You know, if you look at what happens is...
Let's have everybody, let's all get comfortable, because if we're all standing up, it's like a jack in the box.
So sit down.
Let's everybody be comfortable. Otherwise, it's like...
Can y'all see me?
I love all people, but let's just...
All right. If we look back at exactly what happened in 2008, you look at the bailout, and you had the Cash for Clunkers, and then, of course, you had the American Recovery Act, and then you had the first-time home buyers. And all these things that the federal legislation has done, has it worked? So what increased? Spending. And this is the way government does it. Working 20 years for a federal agency, I understand specifically as a cost center manager how they do a budget. Because the budget is basically saying, always put 20% more the next fiscal year so you can at least get the same amount you got before. And coming around July, which is fiscal year is October, we had to spend it all. Otherwise we wouldn't get our money back. We have spent too much money on entitlements. We have spent too much money on areas that we don't need to be involved in, like the Department of Education, for instance. The federal government now took over the student loan program, and people don't know that as part of the Health Care Act. So we need to bring that kind of spending back, and Medicaid. We need to reform it, whether we want to or not. We need to reform Medicare. We need to look at the Department of Defense and start looking at all the fraud, waste, and abuses going on there. You want another one? Social Security. We need to look at Social Security. I'm sorry, when I said in the opening statement carrying our cross, we're going to have to carry our cross. You cannot solve the problems today the same way we created them, which basically means we're going to have to make tough choices and have to sacrifice for those, from the person that's 90 years old to the person that's unborn. Thank you.
Mr. Leopard.
Thank you. The situation is pretty clear. We spend about $3.7 trillion, bringing in roughly about $2 trillion. We're $1.5 trillion on a run rate. In the whole, there's no business, there's no household in America that does those sorts of things. Now, it's easy for the politicians to talk about cutting spending and talk in 7-second sound bites. The reality is most have never cut a dollar spent. I've had to cut spending on the public side as well as on the private side. The framework has got to incorporate 4 things. Number one, it's got to put discipline in the system. I advocate a balanced budget amendment with a spending cap at 18% of the total economy. That includes zero-based budgeting and includes biennial budgeting to put discipline in the system. Number 2, you have to eliminate things. We're so far down the road, we just got to eliminate things. My examples of that would be Department of Education. I've had to do it. We did the City of Dallas. We got out of a lot of programs. The city didn't have any reason to be in. Number 3 is you've got to evaluate everything and go at it. Defense is an example of that. The Department of Defense has not been audited in well over a decade. Well over a decade. I want to have a strong national defense, but the reality is politicians have had their hand in it for all too long. And the 4th area is the one that nobody talks about, and it's the entitlements. We've laid out in detail, probably the most detailed, comprehensive plan any senatorial candidate's ever put out, that talks specifically about how to deal with all 3 entitlement programs. All 3 entitlement programs. And how to do them in a way that protects the interests of the people that are in it, but assures that we actually have a future for people.
Mr. Cleaver.
Good job, guys, so far.
Well, of course, we have a big issue in this country, and we all know it. The number one thing, and Tom said it very well, is that we must hold our Congress accountable. They must be accountable to balance that budget every year. We need a balanced budget amendment. We need to cap that spending. Yes, we need an amendment. Obviously, they don't do it on their own, so we're going to need to hold them accountable. We need to cap their spending. Our spending is at 24% of GDP. We should not be beyond 17 or 18% of our GDP. We're at 24. We're borrowing that money to pay those bills. We must stop that immediately. Our children can't afford to pay that note. Our children can't afford to pay that bill. And we must stop it right now. That number should not surpass, I'm going to say 17%.
16.
Ted Cruz says it's 16.
And if Herman Cain were here, he'd say 9. Thank you very much. Yeah. Good. 15, 20 more seconds.
First and foremost, we must defund any agency that's performing abortions in this nation. Defund them right now, immediately. Thank you for that, because we have got to stand strong in this nation for that. The EPA also needs to be defunded. It's ridiculous with its regulations and rules. Today, even, we're fighting ourselves because we're trying to protect our own borders. We've got the EPA that slapped the Department of Homeland Security with 36 restrictions. We're fighting ourselves. It's amazing. We've got to stop this. It's costing us money. And then also on top of that, and I was startled at the amount of money that we owe the Department of Agriculture. We owe them $50 million.
Let me go ahead. We'll be back. Time. Ms. Pittenger, go right ahead. Carry on. There you go.
Thanks, Kurt.
Good job.
I agree with zero-based budgeting. I will review a balanced budget amendment as long as it requires a supermajority of the Congress to pass it, not the president's whim whenever they decide it might be an emergency. Does anyone think Obama thinks everything he wants is an emergency? There's no way I'm going for presidential approval on that one. What I would say is I'm willing to filibuster any bill that will create a new government program. I also believe we need to deal with fraud, waste, and abuse in Medicare and Medicaid. That particular set of programs alone has $1 trillion a year of a budget, but 10% of it is fraud, waste, and abuse. Credit card companies, it's 0.1%. I think we need to apply some serious discipline and principles inside Medicare and Medicaid. On top of that, frankly, if it's not written explicitly in the Constitution, it doesn't get a dime. Of course, right now, with the way they've inflated our currency, a dime's worth about a penny, so I'm going to say it shouldn't get a dollar either. Zero-based budgeting, sunset commissions, deal with fraud, waste, and abuse. Nothing, not a dime, if it's not in the Constitution, and I'm willing to filibuster any bill that creates a new government program.
Very good. Mr. Addison.
If I'm your senator, I'll introduce any pieces of legislation that begin with the following 5 words. This bill is to repeal. After Obamacare, we have the EPA. We have other job-killing agencies that are affecting our revenue because when people don't work, they don't pay into the system. With regard to Medicaid, I would repeal the entitlement aspect of it. I would make that a block grant program, and if the states wish to put in money on their own, that's their business, but we would allow the state legislators to decide how that program is going to be effective, because guess what? If we don't like the way Vicki or somebody else handles their job, they can be fired. We cannot fire a bureaucrat. So those are some things I would. With regard to welfare programs, in a 4-year period of time, I would tighten up the criteria by 1/3. We've got too many moochers. We have able-bodied, working-age people that are mooching. And so if they're long-term moochers, I would say that their Lone Star card can only pay for beans, rice, and macaroni. All right? We've got too many moochers. They need to have some incentive to get back to work. Also, I'm very much opposed to nation building. I will tell you that it's outrageous that we are building schools in other countries, and within a month of those schools being built, there is an imam teaching them how awful we Americans are. We must take care of America. These nation-building programs are a clear violation of our Constitution, and those are just a few things I could go on and on, but I think you get the point.
Mr. Addison, Mr. Cruz.
My wife and I are blessed to have 2 little girls at home. Our youngest daughter, Catherine's 11 months old, and she was born into this world owing $50,000 in debt because her parents and grandparents couldn't live within our means. We're facing a crisis. If this nation continues on the path we're on, you just have to look across the Atlantic. Look at where Europe is. Look at what's happening in Greece when you have politicians that can't live within their means. This president's putting us on a path to more debt than all 43 presidents that preceded him. And an awful lot of Republicans were complicit in getting us there. The next senator from Texas needs to be a strong conservative and a fighter. I'm going to hit a theme over and over again tonight of a proven conservative record. I have spent a lifetime fighting to defend the Constitution, to defend the 10th Amendment. We need to get the federal government out of areas it doesn't have the constitutional authority to do. We need to eliminate the Department of Education. We need to eliminate the Department of Commerce. We need to eliminate the National Endowment of Arts. We need to eliminate the IRS and move to a flat tax or a fair tax. And most fundamentally, we need to get back to the 10th Amendment, to the idea that our Constitution serves, as Thomas Jefferson put it, as chains to bind the mischief of government and to get the politicians out of our lives.
Very useful segue. Real quick, it's kind of funny because there's been a lot of love shown in the room to the power couple, Vicki and Jim Truitt, and as a measure of their graciousness, they want to make sure that everybody knows it's every single one of 17 Republican clubs in the greatness of Tarrant County to take the Senate. So to spread that level out. Let's stay in the money world for a minute, and let's talk a little bit about taxes. And for the order this time, let's start in the middle. Kurt, that's going to be you. You're going to do that. You're going to send it that way, and come back and work toward the middle again. Let's talk some taxes. Because I don't know how to stood. I stand. It's okay. Good. We're good. We're all good. Let's talk some taxes. The consensus is obvious that taxes are too high. So let's comment on it. There's a huge push these days. And a lot of people, if you ask a bunch of America, should the wealthy pay more? A ton of people say yes. What's your best argument to give those folks? And then share your thoughts on flat tax, sales tax, which of those, if either of them that you like, and any thoughts on taxation in general. Mr. Cleaver, it's all yours.
Well, I am for a flat tax. Obviously, with what we've been doing is not correct. I am for 10% personal income tax, 10% corporate tax. I believe, go ahead, you want to clap? The Lord asked for a tenth. I believe that a tenth is enough for the government. 51% are not paying taxes right now. 51% that are filing for income taxes are not paying taxes. A flat tax would solve that problem.
Very good. Mr. Weber, go ahead. Tax issues.
Am I done?
That seems like a good place. But
Still going?
yeah, let's conciseness again. Conciseness points for me.
Our tax system is ludicrous. There are more words in the tax system, in the tax code, than there are in the Holy Bible. It's well over 70,000 pages. It needs to be reformed significantly, without a question. For too long, Washington's allowed the debate on taxes to be one group wins or one group loses. That's a ridiculous way to look at it. What we ought to look at is how do we grow this economy? You know, for too long we've been in a stagnant economy. That's what the issue, that's what the challenge is. We've got to grow the economy. I wish I could tell you that there was some silver bullet on taxes, and there's not. It's going to be reforming them substantially. It's going to be going to a broader, simpler, fairer system on the individual side. Take out the deductions. Get rid of the junk. On the corporate side, make it competitive. Today we're the highest corporate tax rate in the world. Bring it down to the competitive. I advocate 19%, but take the deductions out. Why should a small company pay 35% and a large corporation that makes billions of dollars pay zero because they've got 2,700 tax attorneys? Take it out. Eliminate double taxation. And finally, encourage people to make investments. Flat, permanent, capital gains tax of 15%. That's a program that we've outlined, and again with the detail. Not 7-second outlines or 7-second sound bites. We're really looking at the situation in a thoughtful way of how we grow this economy. Because we can raise somebody's taxes by 4 percentage points. But I can tell you, that's not worth near as much as growing this economy by 4%. That's how we build a strong economy.
Thank you. Mr. Noella.
One of the 10 Commandments is thou shalt not bear, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods. In a nutshell, I shouldn't be asking the rich to pay more. And I have a problem with that, to be honest with you. It's their money, they earned it. So who am I to take it away from them? Actually, if you give the opportunity, they'll reinvest it if they knew what our tax system was like. But they don't know what to understand. So we do need to reform the whole tax system. Because it's the one issue that controls every part of it, every legislation, of every bureaucratic agency, from every politician, and on and so forth. And that's why I propose actually a fair tax. And it's a 17% fair tax. But you got to eliminate every other tax. You got to eliminate the alcohol, and the gasoline, the tobacco, and the death tax, and you got to eliminate the payroll tax, and so forth. If you want people to invest, quit trying to tax it for making money. The 17% that I look for is temporary for 3 years. And the reason 3 years is because for those first 3 years, I want 2% of it going straight to the national debt. After 3 years, it drops down to 15%. And I bounced this off my wife, who was a lifetime Democrat, by the way, last night. And she agreed. She said, yeah, that sounds pretty fair. Everybody pays. There's nobody that gets exempt. As long as we have tax deductions, tax rebates, tax exemptions, we'll continue to have manipulation. You got to get rid of the system. Thank you.
And again, for just for clarity, the fair tax is the sales tax. Ms. Jones?
Thank you, Mark. Without major tax reform, there is no way we can cut spending enough in this country to close the tremendous, to fill in the tremendous hole that we are in for years to come, the unfunded liabilities. But with a tremendous radical cut in spending and bold tax reform, we can grow our way to prosperity again. Supply side economics has proven time and time again to be successful. If we apply supply side economics, low taxes, low and broad, we will generate more tax income because business creators, job creators will do just that. They'll create jobs, they'll create more taxpayers who are paying into the system at a lower rate. The confiscatory tax scheme that this country and that all of us are under the heavy hand of is unconscionable. The corporate tax rate is so high. Here we are in America, land of the free and home of the brave, and we're driving companies overseas and they're taking their jobs with them. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and getting to stop. And I know how to stop it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Very good. And then here with our tax roundtable continue, Mr. Cruz, you can work toward the middle. Yes, sir.
Our tax code is an abomination. Mayor Leopard mentioned that the tax code has more words in it than the Bible. I'm confident a lot of people in this room have read every word of the Bible. There ain't nobody that's read this tax code. A basic principle of Economics 101. What you tax decreases, what you subsidize increases. Our government right now taxes productivity and subsidizes sloth. And we're surprised when the natural effects of that flow out. The problem with the tax code is the same problem with the Obama agenda across the board. It's all about empowering politicians and bureaucrats to control the economy and our lives. The biggest lie in politics is the lie that Republicans are the party of big business. Big business does great with big government. They have an army of lobbyists that get exemptions in the code that none of the rest of us, the small business people, the entrepreneurs, the working Americans, none of us get it. We need to put every tax accountant, every tax lawyer, and every government lobbyist out of business by getting the tax code out of the business of favoring one American over another.
The funeral home and cemetery business is one of those most regulated businesses in America, and so because of that, I have corporations for my 2 funeral homes, my 2 cemeteries, and my crematory. It's an outrage. I definitely want to simplify it. I've even volunteered my crematory to take care of the current tax code. Having said that, you need to know that as long as we tax business at a 35% level, we will not grow this economy. We need to give industry incentives. And so for all these factories and plants that are closed all across the land, I would say to those corporations, bring those jobs back to the United States. Reopen these factories, and for 10 years, you won't pay one dime of tax on the profits that you generate in these reopened factories. But we've got to, these definitions are all over the place about reforming the tax code. Depends on your definition of a certain word as to what it means. I walked into church a few months ago and I heard the 2 guys talking about it. They said, well, Chuck and Marilyn bought the farm. Well, to a funeral director, that means something totally different than a real estate transaction. And so we've got to understand that these things, the bottom line is we've got to simplify it. And we've got to get the government off our back. Right now, as a businessman, I can tell you that I feel the heavy boot of the American government, the federal government, on my neck. And I told you about repealing. This bill is to repeal. We've got to give those powers back to the states. The states are great competitors. Let's give the industry incentives to get back and bring jobs back to America, and we can take care of all these issues.
Mr. Addison, Ms. Pittenger.
I think it's amazing that the only rich President Obama doesn't want to tax are those who contributed to his campaign fund. Quite frankly, if all of his friends paid their tax bills, we may just be out of debt pretty quick. When it comes to spending and taxation, we need to realize if we held the line on our spending right now and did not allow any more increases, within 4 years, our budget would be balanced. That's how much they're wanting to increase in the next few years. 4 years, it would be balanced. I am for the fair tax, but I'm not voting for it until the previous vote is to eliminate the IRS. Because I think we've got a president right now that would love to double tax us on those sorts of things. I think it is amazing that, yes, like Tom said, there's more words in the tax code than the Holy Bible, and I think the average American's more afraid of an audit than they are of the Holy Father. You better believe people's taxes get turned in. I'm not so sure about tithes right now. It is a crime for our American people to be more afraid of their government than the Lord who founded this nation. This tax code is a big part of it. It does have to go. I am a former volunteer tax preparer, and I didn't read all the code, Ted, because frankly they updated it on a daily basis. And if you saw how many of our elected officials, both Republican and Democrat, benefit financially from this code, you would be outraged. They're making money on the exemptions and the deductions they create. It's time to eliminate that opportunity altogether. Fair tax across the board on everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mix it up a little bit. We've gone all the way around. I'm a big fan in some of the debate things. Everybody has the wonderful show of hands question. It tends to be something strange, but I'm using it as a time saver in the following way. Because we're about to move on to some Obama. Ready?